and good luck. I'm Dov Cohn, and you are tuned in and listening to the Dov Hikind Show. Thank you for joining us. We're here tonight and every Saturday night to discuss interesting topics and current issues, and to hear your thoughts, views, and opinions. Dov is off tonight, and joining me in the studio is my good friend Joe Lazar. Joe, Shavot Tov.
Yotabach. How you doing, Dov?
Okay,
How's
good.
Shabbos?
Shabbos was very nice.
Yeah, it was really a nice, restful Shabbos, and now we're back.
A little cool.
Yeah, it was a little nippy. I had to go to a Shalom Zacher last night, and it was really cold.
Yeah.
What don't you do for friends?
You're right.
Anyway, tonight promises to be, as Ed Sullivan used to say, a really great show for those out there who can still remember who Ed Sullivan was. But before we get into the show, I want to reintroduce my cult buster co-host, Rabbi Shia Hecht, who's here with me every time we do this show, and makes life a lot easier here. But this is a show that we're doing tonight that I think you don't have to be interested in politics, you don't have to be Jewish, you don't have to be anything, but it's really going to be an interesting show to show how politics and government works, and what happens when someone leaves office and leaves a district that needs to be filled, and the governor gets involved and calls for a special election. As people out there may know or may not know, there is a vacancy in the New York State Senate, and there are a couple of people running in the special election that Governor Cuomo called. The special election is going to be on March 20th, and I think anybody who's in the district, and we'll tell you a little more about the district in a few minutes, but anybody who's in that district should make a note now to go out and vote on March 20th. It's going to be a very important election.
In general, I think we can point out, within the Orthodox community, there are many of you out there that are not registered. It is extremely important, something that Assemblyman always talks about.
Always.
If you want to have a voice, you have to be counted. You can only be counted if you actually register. It has nothing to do with them serving in jury duty. They get you anyway with that jury duty. It's extremely important to register. If you want to register as a Democrat, because in Brooklyn, it usually pays to register as a Democrat, but you can register as an independent or Republican. It's very, very important that you use your given right, and be'emes, it's a bracha in this country that we live in, an opportunity that we have that we can vote in our elected officials.
I've always said that the reason that I'm a registered Democrat is the fact that in most contests, especially in the borough of Brooklyn, if you're not a Democrat, you don't get to select who's running for the office, because the major selection is generally done in the primary. It's not done in the general election. So it's very important, in my opinion, to be a registered Democrat, but more than anything else, it's important to be a registered voter and make sure you vote in every election and make sure you're informed about what you're voting on. The election that I'm talking about right now is an election that's going to cover it's an important election for two reasons. Firstly, the area that it covers is Midwood, Sheepshead Bay, Brighton Beach, Mill Basin, and Canarsie. Happens to be my senator because the former senator in this seat was my senator, so the next senator in this seat is going to be my senator. At the same time, this is a district that's probably, nobody knows for sure, but probably going to change very much next year under redistricting. Every 10 years, there's a redistricting done by the State Assembly, and State Senate, where they, because of the size of the shift of the population, they have to reshift all the lines of all of the elected officials. We're talking about the Congress, we're talking about Senate, City Council. So,
although I must say there are, if you ask me my personal opinion, I think that
I always ask
there's a double standard there. But in essence, it's as follows. If you have a large group of people, we wanted to make sure that these group of people, if it's an ethnic group, a religious group, a racial group, etc., whatever it may be, we want to make sure that they have representation in different areas of government. If it's in the city government, if it's in the state government, if it's in the federal government. And the concept of redistricting is very, very important. When people shift around and move around, we want to make sure. But we can ask that same question because I know, for instance, living in Crown Heights right now, the Jewish community of Crown Heights we are in 3 different districts of a council person. Williamsburg is, I believe, also 2 or 3 different council people.
That's not very good for you as a voting block.
No, it's not very good. And I know people that, well, why should there be a voting block? Well, that's the concept. The concept is if you have 50-plus people in a body that makes decisions, we're talking about either in the city or in the state, we should be able to have, say, listen, these 10,000 families, if we're talking about even the Borough Park was very, very different, but in Williamsburg and Crown Heights, it would be very nice if we were able to send someone who looks like us and understands things like us to represent us. They're not going to have the full power to make any decisions. They're one of 50-some-odd or 60-some-odd, depending on what...
I agree with you, and I think you should lobby the legislature to do that for you. But I'm going to tell you something else, though. Many years ago, I learned from a very good friend at that time. His name was Lenny Silverman. He was the assemblyman in Borough Park many, many moons ago. And it wasn't, you say someone who looks, like us or whatever. It's more important that he understands us.
Yes.
And knows what our issues are, knows how we would like those issues voted on. I think that's even more important than looking like us or being like us.
But with that, it's a great introduction to our guest.
Yes, our guest today is a leading city council member, Lou Fidler. I've known him for a while. Good guy. He's running for the state senate seat. And Lou, welcome. Hi.
Good to be on your show, guys. Thank you. Well, let me just tell you, from as early as I can remember, being involved in communal activities in Crown Heights, the name Lou Fidler was on the radar screen. He was someone who really did a lot. I must say, sometimes I'm not even sure exactly what he did and what his exact position is. Maybe he could speak of that position. But I will tell you one thing. In the Crown Heights, during the Crown Heights riots, he was one guy from outside the neighborhood, was in our neighborhood every single day. There with us, side by side, and a Jew that came to us, because I know many Jews ran away from us and many leaders ran away from us. So the fact is, for this alone, you have my endorsement. But there's my endorsement for many other reasons as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So tell us something.
Let's talk about how Lou Fidler got to be here and running for a state senate seat. We know that you've been in the city council for about 10 years. What did you do before that? How'd you get here? How did you get involved in politics in the first place?
Well, Joe, I grew up in a house where my dad was involved as the vice president of what was then called the community board. My mother was the president of the Parents Association of every school I went to, and as the youngest of 3, I got dragged along to all the meetings, and sort of very, very young age, I developed a sense of civic activism and responsibility.
That becomes contagious, doesn't it?
Well, I tried to give it up for about 3 months, and I realized that I'll probably give it up when I give up breathing. I became the founder of the local housing organization in the neighborhood I grew up in, which was East Flatbush. I was the vice president of the Community Development Corporation, and by the time I was 26, I was the chairman of the Community Planning Board in the neighborhood. So it was something that was very much part of my upbringing and who I I am and my essence, I guess. I was very privileged 10 years ago to get elected to the city council. I use the word privilege advisedly because I think it is really a privilege.
Well, I know you worked hard.
People.
I know you worked really hard to get that privilege because I remember when you were out there campaigning. So, hard work does pay off sometimes.
Hard work is the only thing I know. So, and I take nothing for granted. Matter of fact, sometimes I get criticized for campaigning too hard or working too hard. I honestly think that anyone who goes into an election assuming they're going to win is arrogant, and that is a character flaw that I hope I will never have.
Did I see? Remind me. Did I see if you were the youngest person to hold a position in the city in the planning board?
I think I was the youngest community board chair in the city, at least at that time. I don't know if that's still the case. I try not to keep track of those records.
But we can definitely say you had good training for a long time. Although you're still a young man, please God, and many years in front of you, please God. But yeah, I think that is something that you should wear with more pride because, as you said, you were sort of born into it by being schlepped to those meetings, and then serving in a position at a very young age, I think really gives a person a tremendous advantage. And as Joe said earlier, it gives you an understanding of how to think, how the people think, understand things, how the people understand things, and therefore understand what they need, and you're able to serve them by representing them in the city council and soon hopefully.
A lot of people underestimate the community planning boards and what they do and what experience you really get when you're there. And I can tell you that having been a member of the boards prior to when they started having board managers and stuff like that, I was actually appointed to Community Board 12 in Borough Park, probably I think in 1972, by a guy at that time named Howie Golden, who was the city councilman to become borough president. And you know what? You really learn a lot because that's where all the local people come to air their problems and air their opinions, and you actually get to learn what to do and why to do it, the right reasons for it. So when you do show up in a city council position or a state senate position, at least you know what you're there for, you know what you're doing, you know how to listen to people. You don't just vote for whatever sounds good. It's not a ham sandwich that you're voting for.
I too sat on a planning board for a number of years, so I know those meetings very, very well.
and I have to tell you, I have a great deal of empathy for my colleagues who serve on community boards now. Very often people will come out, there'll be an issue that angers them or annoys them in the community, and they don't realize that the people who are sitting on the community board are all volunteers, and they come there and they wag their finger and say, you people.
Yeah,
you people are doing this, and they don't understand that we are you people, and that, you're there to help them, work through their issues with government. And one of the primary things that I learned as community board chair, and I have to tell you that when I was a community board chair, I represented a neighborhood that was 80% black and Caribbean. The whites and Jews were a distinct minority in East Flatbush by the time I became a community board chair. But I recognize that most people want the same things. They want safe streets. They want clean streets. They want the garbage picked up. They want to make sure that if there's a fire, the firehouse is open.
Everybody's got the same problems.
They want their kids to get a good education, whether it be in public school or private school or whatever. And they want to be able to live their lives without government overly burdening them in ways that they shouldn't. And it's an incredible thing when you step back and you realize that. It doesn't matter whether it's Borough Park or Flatbush or Sheepshead Bay or Canarsie. People generally, I think you can say with a pretty good generalization, people want that wherever they come from and whomever they are.
Well, talking about education, let's actually
let's get into it.
Of education. As a father who has some kids still in yeshiva and some who went through the yeshiva system, that is one of the hot issues, I think, in New York State, talking about either vouchers or some type of what is your stand on some of these things of how yeshivas, by the way, today it's the number one killer within the Orthodox community. Tuition is really a killer. It's turning people away. People say it has been used as a form of birth control, etc., which I don't think we.
No, but it also it also is one of the major causes of family disputes. Parents can't make ends meet because tuition is just so outrageous. Do you have any ideas on how can the tuition problem be mitigated somehow?
Well, gentlemen, you'd have to be deaf, dumb, and blind to be, representing this community and not know that's the problem. Look, I'm not, and I don't pretend to be orthodox.
She will still work on that.
I consider myself. I consider myself
30 years,
and they haven't succeeded
I
yet.
consider myself a very committed Jew, but I don't pretend to be something that I'm not. But so in my world, I have two children, one who's in college, one who's in law school, and I know the strain of paying for their tuition. They're both in private institutions, so I could just imagine what it'd be like to have 3 or 4 or 5 kids, and I've had to have paid those bills from the time they were
6 years old.
Exactly. And what we call middle class here in New York, the burden that places. So there are lots of different things that we have to be looking at, and I think one of them, perhaps the most practical of them, is tuition tax credits. Properly written, properly targeted, can be legal and can be applied to help.
What do you mean by legal? What would make something illegal?
The Constitution of the United States has been interpreted in lots of different ways, and of course it's a living, breathing document, and the interpretations change from time to time. I think that from the reading that I've done, it would seem to be the path of least resistance to get help to families that are strained on the tuition front would be some kind of tax credit program.
As opposed to vouchers.
Which I have. There are numbers of practical issues with vouchers, and there are numbers of issues not related to yeshiva that vouchers would impact on as well in terms of charter schools and whatnot. The fact of the matter is there are other things that we can do as well, and that's to try and pick up some of the costs that are associated. I mean, there are two sides to every question, right? They charge you what it costs. If you can reduce some of those costs, for example, we have a very onerous school busing situation right now. Even though the public schools or the public provides school busing to yeshivas, there are very little practical use because the contract is written in such a way that the buses have to be home before the yeshivas are closed. I mean, there's something we can take out of the hands of that contract, move it over maybe into a voucher system for something like that, where the individual yeshiva can negotiate, perhaps save both the taxpayer money and make the service practical and save money to the institution. Kind of a win-win-win, common sense kind of stuff like that we ought to be looking at. I mean, you can reduce the pressure in more than one way, and we're going to have to continue doing that until we actually reduce the pressure.
Well, you mentioned charter schools. Is there perhaps an area there that we can really create some of these schools to be more religious oriented, or perhaps run one program after another and actually run a charter school? The afternoon school will be only a charter school?
I'm not a charter school believer. I think that for those kids who choose, or those parents who choose to educate their children in a non-religious environment, there ought to be one tier of school systems. And I find that the charter school system has created a multi-tier level of haves and have-nots. We see the fighting that goes on. It's kind of funny. I'm very, very involved in the issues of education and public education. We fight over a million things. They should just let teachers teach. We know what works. And we keep on reinventing and reinventing the system and rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The bottom line is that we have smaller class sizes, quality teachers, experienced principals in our public schools. No one would be talking about charter schools.
Lou, I agree with you on all that because, especially on the charter school issue, but all the related issues you're talking about, why start something new instead of fixing what we have? What we're trying to do is we're leaving what we have have that we say is broken, not fix it, and try to run off and do new things that are going to be even more broken. So,
especially when we actually know what works.
Right.
And if you look at the numbers for the mayor's charter school initiatives versus the old schools, and you factor out for English as second language and special ed kids that aren't necessarily going to charter schools in the same numbers, there's really no difference in performance. The mayor has this idea that he closed down a school in order to fix it. Nonsense. Get rid of the principal if the principal's not working. Get a good principal in there. Show some leadership. Make sure that the school's properly funded, and schools can turn around. We're going to see that, and I think that would be the test of time. Let's stop, fooling around with reinventing things when we know what works. It's just common sense.
I agree with that. Yeah.
One of the big problems within the Orthodox community, and I talk from Crown Heights, Borough Park, Williamsburg, is that they're at-risk kids. And I know that you have somewhat of a history sitting on the Committee of Youth.
Actually, more than sitting there, he's the chair. He's the chair of the youth committee.
And I asked the chair.
You get all the praise and...
I asked the chair, the Youth Services Committee of the Council, if you want to have an impact on the future of a city, you want to impact the children. And early on in my tenure, I did a tour of homeless shelters, not the kind where you go with your family. That's bad enough, that a family is homeless and there are kids. But of kids who are homeless without their families because they've been driven from their homes by abuse, sexual, physical, mental abuse, or both parents are in jail, or they were in foster care and the foster care system failed them. There are 3,800 of those kids sleeping on the streets of New York City tonight. 3,800.
And a lot of them are Orthodox. And we do have an Orthodox population that's on the street. I've been involved in this Kids at Risk thing in the Orthodox community for the last 12 to 15 years, and I have not seen the problem go away.
No one is immune. No community is immune.
And no family is immune.
And I will tell you that I don't hide from the fact that I direct discretionary money to the best of my ability. Everyone says they fight for their share. I'll be honest with you. I fight for more than my fair share. I think that's my job.
Right.
And so I'm very proud of having been able to direct funds to places, to organizations like Our Place or Rachel's Place, which is a shelter bed run by Emmanuel Inc.
Actually,
for homeless girls.
Actually, a very nice program.
I provided almost 100% of their funding, and I'm very proud of it. I think let's be honest. I mean, it's not a big vote getter. If those kids aren't going to vote, I probably will never meet them. But I will tell you that if I do nothing,
you're saving lives.
If I do nothing else in politics, if I do nothing else in government, I will be satisfied that my time was well spent by quadrupling the number of shelter beds for kids who are sleeping on subway gratings at night and selling their bodies and their souls in order to survive.
And drugging and all the other things.
We are talking to Councilman Lou Fidler. We're talking about an election that's coming up in March.
March 20th.
March 20th, a special election. And I guess the question is very simple. How do you think that you will continue to do for your community in
the state legislature
as you do here in the city?
Now, I guess by continuing the philosophy of government that I've had, I have a 10-year record. I have a record of getting things done for people and for communities, for delivering, for telling the truth, for being out there. I call it the 4 C's. First, you have to have common sense. You have to look at
very little of that out there.
Let me tell you, and it's certainly a problem in Albany, particularly in the state Senate. It's definitely a problem in Washington, where people go and they're ideologues. I'm a right winger, I'm a left winger, I'm a top winger, I'm a bottom winger. There's not enough common sense figuring out what matters to people, how to fix it, how to see the problem, and how to find a solution. And I've done that. And there are numbers of examples. I don't know if we have time to go into them, but I could tell you about some of them.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll give you one. It's a terrific one. I practice a little bit of real estate law. I guess I have to admit I'm a lawyer.
Wow. Well, we won't hold that against you.
Confession. But I was going to closings. I was going to real estate closings and seeing people come to the table and get a 100% loan-to-value loan with a 3-year adjustable rate mortgage and a balloon. And that was working for 20 years.
Until they called it all back.
Well, because all the real estate values were going up, so that even though you had no equity in the house, when your real estate values went up, a couple of years later you'd refinance conventionally, and that was good. But I was sitting at the table saying, this can't go on forever. That sooner or later the bubble's going to, property values don't have to decline. They just have to level off, and there'll be a disaster. So I saw that, and I went to my colleagues at the council, and this is a documentable, fact. 2 years before the mortgage foreclosure crisis hit, I predicted it. And it wasn't because I was an expert in Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac.
You saw it at the table.
That's right. Yeah. I saw it. It was common sense. And so I made a proposal to my colleagues to put in foreclosure prevention and assistance services into the budget. The mayor and I don't always get along, but on this one, he saw eye to eye with me. We created something called the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. Thousands of New Yorkers have probably remained in their homes because we saw it coming. It was just common sense. Maybe that's why real estate values, as tough as things are here in New York, this isn't Las Vegas or Cleveland or South Florida, where real estate values have plummeted. New York hasn't done so badly. That was just common sense, and then doing something about it. The second C is communication. I mean, I have to tell you, I get laughed at because if there's a meeting of 3 people in my district, I'm one of them. I come, I don't necessarily go to pontificate, I say my piece, and then I usually stay because I want to hear what people have to say. It's maybe more important than what I have to say to them.
I always said that you can always solve every problem out there as long as you keep talking. Once you shut down that communication, there's absolutely no way to solve a problem. So that bridge is very important.
And I'll tell you something else, Joe. I read every piece of mail that comes into my office from a constituent, and I read every piece of mail that goes out to a constituent. If I get 5 letters in a week about broken sidewalks, I'll know that there's a broken sidewalk problem, and that matters. And if they're all on the same block, then I know there's a real problem someplace that I have to direct attention to. So communication's number 2. Number 3 is character. And you have to know right from wrong. For example, knowing that it's wrong, responsible adults don't let children sleep on the street at night in a subway grating without a shelter bed. You have to know what's right and wrong. And the last C is my favorite. Chutzpah. You have to have a little bit of chutzpah, because once you've figured out what makes sense and what your people have told you, that's right. You need to be. I am my mother's son. My mother always felt that there was something to be said. She had to say it. I feel the same way. Sometimes my big mouth gets me into trouble, but you know what? You've got to be able to say what you believe in. And the nicest thing that's ever been said about me in politics, nicest thing was said to me about the mayor. The mayor and I have not had a great relationship all the time. It's been up and down.
He's got a lot of chutzpah.
Yeah, he does, but he's got a lot of money to back up his.
That's true.
We fought tremendously over the section, the Priority 7 vouchers and whatnot, things like that. And some of the things that he did on that, I think, were very, very cynical, particularly when it involves this constituency, this community. But the mayor had to say something nice about me one day because we were in front of a group of my constituents, and I had said something nice about him. And so the mayor said, I have to tell you, your councilman's no shrinking violet, and when he's on the other side, he can be quite a pain in the tuchus. I think what he was saying was I fight hard for what I believe in, and I do it effectively.
And that's what you're there for.
And that's what I intend to do in Albany.
Well,
I think you use a little bit of that in Albany.
I think it's important. I think it's very important because in the state legislature, a lot of the issues that are dealt with in the legislature impact the city tremendously because, home rule. There are issues that Albany does and gives the city, and then the city can do its own legislation around it. But first, it's got to be in Albany. We're going to take a very short break to do some business, and we'll be back in a minute.
And I just want to mention, this Wednesday, there'll be a dinner for Yad Ephraim, a wonderful organization. This Wednesday, January 18th, at a Terrace Golden Menorah Hall. There'll be guest of honors, Harry Adler, Dominic Stanzone, and a good friend of ours, Rabbi Joseph Stam. So that's January 18th, this Wednesday night. If you want to make last-minute reservations, please call 718-431-0404. That's 718-431-0404. And we are back with Joe, Rabbi Hecht, and our guest, Lou Fidler.
Thank you. By the way, Yad Ephraim is an unbelievable organization. They're really great. Unfortunately, I have a board meeting that night, but they are...
You have to let the whole entire audience know that you're not going to be there?
It is a great organization. The Bikur Cholim they do is unbelievable, and anybody who can support them really should. We're back again, and, we started talking about the fact that, Lou Fidler is a city councilman, and he does a lot of great work in the city council, and he's running for the Senate seat that has been vacated, and there's a special election for, March 20th. But one of the things that we didn't really go into, and I think is very important for the Jewish community and a lot of the Jewish listeners out there, is the fact that with redistricting, this particular district next year could look a lot different than it does right now.
If you ask me, I would say if I was living in his district, I would think that Lou Fidler would be able to represent me anytime in Albany or in Washington, by the way. So if you decide to go...
Is he running for Congress as well?
No, I promise not.
No, but I just
don't promise anything.
I just want to say that the way things look right now, nobody has any final numbers or any final districts, but it looks like this district is going to be, quote unquote, they're talking about it being the Jewish district. It's going to take Jewish populations in Borough Park, Flatbush, Midwood, all the way to Sheepshead Bay.
That's going to be in November. Right now.
That's right.
Right now he's going to be running.
Right. That's what I'm saying. The district is going to look different.
Are going to look the way you think they're going to.
Well, but it is going to look different than it is right now, and I think we should talk about some of the issues that the Jewish community has.
The councilman has, first of all, has a history with Crown Heights of over 30 years working with the Community Council of Crown Heights. As I mentioned earlier, in 1992, one of the few...
And you're hearing this from Mr. Crown Heights.
Thank you. One of the few Jews in leadership positions that actually came day after day to our neighborhood and stood shoulder by shoulder with us during that time. But I'd like if we could take a few moments. One of my father, blessed memory, Rabbi J.J. Hecht, one of the first times he said, before going about meetings with your father, one of the first political meetings I remember going with him was to the Attorney General, who then was just became Attorney General after being the Bronx Borough President. The name escaped me for a moment, and
Abrams.
Bobby Abrams, yeah.
And I remember one of the things that he talked about was about the fact that different shuls that they close up, and two things that people, they just sell it for other houses of worship and pocket the money, and we have to see to it to keep shuls alive.
Well, the Attorney General is responsible to oversee not-for-profits and what they do with all of their...
So I think the councilman has a story where he saved the shul, Beis Yehuda, in, is it Flatlands and Schenectady?
Beth Judah, yes.
Beth Judah. And I think we have a moment to talk a little bit about your involvement in Brooklyn College, in the Hillel, and where you had used that chutzpah. And, okay, let's start with those two stories.
I'm particularly proud of the Beth Judah story because I was approached by a group of rather elderly congregants who, Flatlands was a changing community. Now it's kind of funny because the Jewish community is moving closer and closer to Schenectady and Flatlands. If I were to say there's a shul at Schenectady and Flatlands now, people wouldn't be so surprised. But 16 years ago, maybe a little bit more so, and they came to me and said, Lou, our shul was padlocked last night. The board doesn't live in the neighborhood anymore. They want to put the building up for sale. Who knows what it's going to be? We can't travel. We can't sell our homes and move. We need a place to daven. And so I took up their cause. I volunteered to be their attorney. At first we went to court, and then very quickly we went to a Bezdin. I remember Rabbi Schechter and Rabbi Willett were two of the Rabbanim on the Bezdin, and at the end of a very, very contentious process, we saved the shul. My synagogue loaned the Sefer Torah to the shul because the synagogue had no more kosher Sefer Torah, and for 16 years Beth Judah operated borrowing a Sefer Torah until 3 weeks ago.
Just passed a few weeks ago, just passed on with a sign out front saying about welcoming the new Torah.
3 weeks ago, they got a new Torah. We danced in the streets. For 16 years, this synagogue has continued, has a daily minyan, it has the yeshiva, and I can't drive past there without feeling good about it and knowing. We went there when the Torah was being dedicated, and the people that were there from 16 years ago, I could see in their eyes, what a mitzvah it was to keep that shul open, and I was very, very proud of it, and it will be a lasting accomplishment.
Brooklyn College, Hillel.
Nowadays, we have political correctness. In the 1990s, we had political correctness gone wacky. I got a phone call from a woman by the name of Linda Ashkenazi. Linda was the executive director of the Brooklyn College Hillel. And someone had told Linda that I was a good guy when it came to standing up for Jews. And that I would give him my time as an attorney.
The fourth seat for chutzpah.
There was a young lady at Brooklyn College. I'll refer to her only by her first name. She was a 19-year-old Israeli girl named Natalie. And she had gone to a symposium on campus that was sponsored by the PLO sympathizing group on campus. And there was what I can only describe as a self-hating Jewish professor on the campus who came and spoke to this group with his mother, who was a Holocaust survivor, numbers on her arm, sitting in the front row, and compared the Israeli army to the Nazis and the Gestapo. And this young lady stood up in that room and challenged that professor. And they brought her up on charges. Of course. Can you imagine? They brought her up on charges. And so I
actually remember this.
Even talking about it, I'm still outraged by it. It just, and so I took it to the president of Brooklyn College. I took it to the school. I told them that I would sue them. We went through a process, and eventually they dropped the charges against Natalie, and she was able to continue her education at Brooklyn College with the pride that she had in being who she was and having stood up for what she believed in, and frankly, the right thing. As a result of that, by the way, I became involved with the Hillel at Brooklyn College. I became the chairman of the board and the president. We did an entire Renaissance campaign there, and maybe the most important thing we did there was open its first Center for Russian Jewish Life. There was many of the Russian students at Brooklyn College barely had any idea that they were even Jewish. Sure. And getting them into the building for whatever reason, maybe they now would celebrate Hanukkah, understand a little bit more about their heritage. And Hillel, as an organization, began to spread the Centers for Russian Jewish Life throughout all of their campuses throughout the city and the state.
And there's a big Russian population there that they have to deal with.
Absolutely. And, the programs that are at Brooklyn College now at the Hillel, again, something that I'm proud of, and I think I have had something to do with its legacy. So
you'll excuse my sarcasm, but there's a very close friend of the Jewish people in the city council, a guy named Charles Barron, who has done everything he could to show his friendship to our community. I'm sure you've had the pleasure or displeasure of having some conversations or having some dialogue with the gentleman. I was wondering if you could shed some light on any of that.
When we first were elected to the council at the same time in January of 2002, we came to understand who Charles Barron was very, very quickly. And my colleague at that time, Simcha Felder, and later on David Greenfield, and I came to an understanding that Charles Barron should not be addressed except when absolutely necessary. Okay. Because he loved the attention. And he would say things that were controversial. And so it's really only when he was at his most hateful that it was necessary to stand up. And, I've seen Charles mean, the problem with Charles Barron is that he's a pleasant human being. He's fun to talk to. He's glib. He's articulate. That's what makes him dangerous. This past year, I introduced a resolution because the United Nations was going to hold a celebration of the 10th anniversary of the Durban Conference. I'm sure you're familiar with the Durban Conference. The United States walked out of it. Numbers of nations walked out of it because it was a hate fest. And yet the United Nations was going to celebrate the 10th anniversary.
Well, we know where the United Nations stand.
So my resolution basically said that the city of New York should offer no accommodation to the United Nations for this quote-unquote festival. We just assume they take it elsewhere.
Let me guess, he was against your resolution.
Charles Barron stood up on the floor, and there's actually a YouTube of what he said and my response. Charles Barron stood up on the floor and said, Durban wasn't all that bad. So some people walked around with pictures of Hitler and gave out the protocols of the Elders of Zion. People will do that, and the council members who were signing on to my resolution really shouldn't. And he then ran out of the room like the chicken that he sometimes is. And I got up on the floor as soon as I could possibly be recognized, and I kind of gave it back to him. And the fact of the matter is, I'm not ashamed. I stand up to bigotry wherever I see it, and as a Jew, I'm not ashamed to stand up and stand up to anti-Semitism when I see it. And when I was done, 41 of the 51 council members had signed on to that resolution. So we stand up to Charles Barron as necessary. And I'll tell you another place, and it's not just Charles Barron. You remember when the Westboro Baptists came to Ocean Park, those horrible, hateful people? There were two elected officials who came that day to express our disgust. One was Dov Hikind.
Right.
I was the other. I didn't send out a press release. I just came because I thought it was necessary for me to come. And what I did when I got there, with them standing there screaming their hateful, vile, anti-Semitic stuff, I grabbed a couple of the yeshiva boys and I put on tefillin 5 feet away from them. I thought that was the appropriate act, that they should see, that we would not be cowed.
You're not going to stand down. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
I actually noticed something else before that I think we actually did off the air. We're going to talk about Lubavitch, the National Council for Jewish Education has a Toys for Tots campaign.
Let's take a
No, but the councilman offered you a donation of, he had toys.
Yes.
And I thought that was very nice. It was out of the blue. And
right before the show, we were talking about the toys campaign, that we're still giving out some toys till the end of the month to some of the organizations. And, of course, hospitals, nursing homes, the things that we do during this time of the year, during December and January. And the councilman said, I do a drive of my own.
And I've got leftover toys, and I'm going to donate it to to your campaign. I thought that was very nice. I think, we should actually give him credit for doing that.
We don't do it for credit. We do it to the kids.
No, I hear you.
It's my pleasure. It really is.
No, but I felt that it was something that should be mentioned because it was offline and it was done as a very nice gesture, and I felt that it should be mentioned.
Councilman Lou Fidler, soon to be state senator Lou Fidler, we want to thank you very much for joining us here this evening. You have my endorsement without any reservation whatsoever. It's perhaps because of the fourth of the four C's that is your motto, having chutzpah, standing up for Jewish causes, really understanding our community. And I must say, from 1992 and before then, hearing your name in Crown Heights and the different things that you have worked with our council to help make sure that the question of housing or other issues that were affected our direct community. And I must say, whenever I've needed or others have called upon me for help, I sent them your way, and they always came back to me and said, listen, he helped us. So for those of you who do live in the district, it's a man to vote for. He's a man that's going to not only represent you, but will actually work for you.
Thank you both. Thank you very much.
March 20th. Don't forget the date. And more important than anything else is go out and vote.
Absolutely.
Always. Thank you, Lou. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, we got a few other issues that I want